Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have an exceptional show for you today, certainly the best one so far this week. How about that? Batya Ungar-Sargon is back with us for Mondays. Great to see you, Batya.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you, Robby. Liz Wolfe will also be joining us to discuss the disparities between Black children and white children regarding vaccine statuses and how this is affecting their education in D.C. And Haley Smith will be with us to discuss celebrities accused of violating LA County's water restrictions. But first, President Biden put his new campaign strategy on display. Last week, he began ramping up his aggression towards the GOP, signaling what the Washington Post is calling a, quote, no-holds-barred strategy for midterms, after Biden accused the GOP of, quote, semi-fascism, taking aim at MAGA Republicans. Over the weekend, reporters pressed Biden over his remarks. Here's what he had to say.
What do you mean by semi-fascism, sir?
In December, you will...
You know what I mean.
Meanwhile, Press Secretary Jean-Pierre explained what the president meant further.
Is it something the president's going to kind of embrace, or is there any sense that it was, a little impromptu and it's going to turn into a kind of basket of deplorables thing that he regrets and tries to be quiet about?
Look, I was very clear when laying out and defining what MAGA Republicans have done, and you look at the definition of fascism and you think about what they're doing in attacking our democracy, what they're doing in taking away our freedoms, wanting to take away our rights, our voting rights. I mean, that is what that is. It is very clear, and that's why he made that powerful speech that you heard from him last night. And he has not shied away from saying that. You have heard him maybe not use that specific word, but you have heard him certainly use that definition. And look, what we are putting before the American people is a choice, right? And it is clear, there's a clear contrast as what is happening on that side of the aisle and what's happening on our side with congressional Democrats and what we have been delivering for the American people.
How do you feel about that strategy, Batya? Make Republican opposition seem like they're just fascists. So how could you vote for them? You must be a fascist if you do so.
I just keep coming back to the fact that President Biden, when he was campaigning to be president, kept saying, I am going to be a uniter and not a divider. I am going to lower the temperature. I am going to bring the American people back together. I am going to be the president of the entire country, not just half of it. And this is the exact opposite of that. It is so appalling to me. I mean, this is actually, it's very much a basket of deplorables moment, but it's even worse because there, Hillary Clinton was impugning their character, which was bad enough. But here, literally comparing people, voters, a party to fascists. It's so unbelievable. And it's exactly what he's accusing them of, right? To suggest that there's no legitimate opposition to your side, to your political orientation, to your, political agenda. There's no legitimate criticism. There's no legitimate way to say, hey, maybe we think we should be limiting abortion at 12 weeks. Hey, maybe we think that we should be, doing this or that the president happens to not agree with for whatever reason. To call that fascism is itself to do the biggest crime of fascism, which is, uniparty authoritarian rule where you say, I don't accept that my political opposition is legitimate. What do you think about this, Robby?
Yeah, I mean, it's just an annoying, to use that hyperbole. Why not turn that around? Like, what then was it, was it fascist? I thought it was a vast, exceeding presidential authority when Biden, unilaterally declared a federal vaccine mandate last week, and we're going to talk more about the student loan debt forgiveness plan, I think, in both of our radars today. But, that's something that Nancy Pelosi didn't think he had the authority to do that as recently as, whenever she made those comments. So is that fascism? We're just going to call everything fascism if we don't like it. It's so insulting. And it speaks to the fact that I think it's the case that Democrats are more likely to call Republican voters bad people. They call Republican voters bad people. Republicans say insane things about Democratic politicians. They go to the mat against Democratic politicians, Democratic policies. I don't know that they try to insult Democratic voters in the same way, because they know that they can win and are winning some people who have voted Democrat historically, who voted for Obama, as recently as 10 years ago. They know they can get those people. They have gotten those people. Trump got a lot of those people, and they can continue to do so even without Trump. So they don't humiliate them. They don't insult them. The Democrats have this because their coalition is now really so much more of an elite coalition of a very well-educated young elite coalition. They do feel this license to insult Republican voters, probably to their own detriment. Probably they're losing people they would get because they talk down to them.
And I think what's so interesting is that in addition to running as a uniter, one of the reasons I think that President Biden took the Democratic nomination in 2020 was he refused to run on the agenda of the Twitterati, right?
Yes.
He was very good at saying, I am running for votes of average normie Americans, right, who don't have time to be on Twitter all day, which is where that elite that you just described hangs out and has like a total lock on, the discourse. But now to me, it really seems like he's running to be president of Twitter, right? Calling them semi-fascists. I mean, that is like total, like right out of the Twitterati elite leftist playbook. And then the president's own Twitter account, they started the official White House Twitter account started trolling, Marjorie Taylor Greene on questions like, taking out PPE loans and things like this. Since when he promised that he was going to be the guy who didn't do mean tweets, right? And now here we are, midterm elections, and he's the guy who's doing mean tweets. It's just, there's such an irony to it.
And there's such a clear trajectory for success when the Democrats are looking like they're going to have a much better fall in terms of the election than we were expecting a few months ago. I think for a variety of reasons, but I think in part because many of these Republican candidates in Arizona, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania are weird or off-putting or very extreme, outside what the median potential Republican voter is in those states. Also, the Dobbs decision has unleashed, I think, some levels of anti-abortion legislation that are further to the right than what many people are comfortable with. And you're seeing, I think you're seeing in real time, some voters who were really fed up with Democratic policies saying, well, the economy is starting to do a little bit better, and you know what? These people are more extreme than I'm willing. They're more connected to Trump, who I really want out of the scene. And so Democrats can still do well, but then when they use this rhetoric, it just seems so ridiculous. Like they can't help themselves but talk down to these voters because it's such a losing approach. And to your point, NBC's Peter Alexander pointed out that there's hypocrisy over Biden's previous stance on being a unifier, just like you said. Let's watch this.
There's no backpedaling on this. It's clear that there's a more aggressive strategy. We talked about the way that they were handling the debate over student loans.
Do you think he actually soft-pedaled it? Do you think someone said you should say fascism and he said I'm going to say semi-fascism?
When I spoke to Age, this wasn't a teleprompter speech. This is what he's been thinking. They say he said it out loud. This was done not on camera, but it fires up Democrats. It juices up the base because they want to see him be more aggressive on that. But it also does become problematic because this is a guy who said he wanted to be a unifier.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Again, and I think it's very foolish when Republicans say Joe Biden is a, Marxist, communist, progressive, liberal, socialist. I'm like, well, okay, he's a liberal, he's a progressive. I don't think he's a socialist. He's definitely not a Marxist or a communist. But you'll hear all those things thrown at him. But then their side does it too.
And what bothers me the most about this is that the president's, the sort of Joe-mentum that the Democratic Party is riding right now is based on a series of very successful bipartisan pieces of legislation that got a lot of Republican votes. The CHIPS Act, the gun control legislation. Earlier, we had the big infrastructure legislation. These are bills that got a lot of support from Republicans. And, in thanks for their efforts, they get to now see the president go out there and call their voters semi-fascists. I really think that irony is really important to point out because, for a minute there, it felt like, oh, wow, Biden is actually ruling the way that he said what he would when he was campaigning. He's making these, strides across the aisle, getting, support for legislation that's extremely popular with the American people, only to come out and campaign for the midterms in this really, really ugly rhetoric.
Right. Semi-fascism. What does that even mean? That's such a ridiculous term. Are we? Haven't you succumbed to fascism, or you haven't? I mean, I guess we're on the road to fascism. And what they mean by that, when elite people use that term, right? They're talking about threats to our election integrity kind of stuff, which, fair enough, Republicans have said a lot of really ridiculous things about election stuff and have tried, to make tweaks that would be bad. They've largely failed at that. And then they talk about, like misinformation is what's ruining our democracy. There's like too much speech on social media. It's too easy for people to make their own judgment about things that actually don't sound like fascism at all to me and are like the opposite of centralized government-based control over what you can say and think and do. We have less of that. It's harder to do that. And that's what a lot of those people who talk about fascism actually mean, that, there's too much. You might fall sway to something right-wing people think on social media, which is the opposite of fascism.
100%. And I think it's that, and also the best example of this was a Washington Post cartoon about the truckers' convoy in Canada. And it had, the cartoon was this. It was a series of trucks, and it said fascism on them, right? These working class truck drivers who were opposing a semi-fascistic vaccine mandate that they put something in their body. It doesn't matter that 90% of them were vaccinated. Doesn't matter that they sit alone in their trucks all day encountering nobody. This actually semi-fascistic mandate that they get vaccinated, they were engaged in this labor protest against that. And to the elites in the media, that is what looks like fascism to them, is standing up to their actual overreach, their actual authoritarianism. It's such an important point that you just made, Robby.
We won't let people come from other countries, can't come into this country unless they get vaccinated. Djokovic can't come compete here because of that. Ridiculous. No public health rationale for it. Not a policy that should exist. Not one that was voted on by any legislative body. It's just a policy of our homeland security apparatus that makes no sense. But we're not supposed to call that fascist. It's not. I mean, it's, again, that would be hyperbole. It's just a very bad policy that should be changed. But the one-sided nature of these things. One more for our audiences. New York Governor Kathy Hochul taking a page out of Biden's new playbook. Let's watch this.
And we're here to say that the era of Trump and Zeldin and Molinaro, just jump on a bus and head down to Florida where you belong, okay? Get out of town. Get out of town. Because you don't represent our values. You are not New Yorkers.
And there was some rhetoric, I believe, from Charlie Crist recently, who's running for governor in Florida against DeSantis, saying that he doesn't want Republicans to vote for him. He wouldn't, not that they would, not that I think he's offering anything they would like, but yeah, he doesn't, it's that attitude. I don't want those voters, I don't want them, which is just, okay, good job, good luck running that campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so sad, like their version of protecting democracy is eliminating the thing that makes a democracy, which is, tolerance for the viewpoints of others, right? And, I think at the end of the day, there are two components to like the MAGA movement, the sort of Trumpism with or without Trump. There is that piece about election denialism that makes me very uncomfortable, that, the sort of the January 6th stuff, right? That's there. We can't deny that that's there. But to me, the real force behind Trumpism, the real the thing that gave it that momentum, that gave it that vector, that the thing that it truly represents, that Trump truly represents, is the forgotten working class who saw him as a tribune, the people that the elites of both parties abandoned for so long, whose communities they destroyed, who saw in him and who see in this movement their economic agenda. It is, Trump's economic agenda was extremely populist in nature, extremely protectionist. We talk about this all the time. All the stuff you hate, Robby, it was extremely close to everything Bernie Sanders ran on in 2015 and 2016. And that is the piece that I think is really threatening to the left, because these are the people that the left used to represent that they have abandoned. And so they have to cast this as fascism or as racism, which they do all the time, to hide the class divide that they have benefited from in the way that they have abandoned Trump's voters.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, we'll tell you what's on our radars. I think we're both talking about the student loan debt forgiveness. Stay tuned for that.